Good morning, everybody. I am Brian Nemhauser, and welcome to another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. It is a beautiful, beautiful Monday morning, and I swear I'm losing track of the days. This off season, everything just kind of mushes together, but today is going to be a day to remember. Today, we get to have one of our favorite guests, friends of the show, back on with us to talk about your Seahawks and your Seahawks new head coach, Mike Macdonald, and specifically continuing a conversation that I had with Jeff Simmons yesterday about the secondary and specifically the safety group. Cody Alexander, one of the best in the biz at diagnosing, describing, breaking down defense, joins the show again. He talked to us earlier about some of the things that Mike Macdonald was doing in his coverage schemes that other teams are starting to do. And I think I probably understood about 60% of it. You know, Cody's a teacher, so he's here to help us learn along the way as well. But Cody, man, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, what's going on over at Matt's quarters during the offseason? What are you spending your time doing when there's not active games going on?
Yeah, so this is where I go back through and I'm kind of watching the kind of how our defense is playing different offenses. What are we looking at? Different game plans. Try and make it through every single team, so I have some semblance of an idea when we hit August what we're going to be looking at come the fall.
I had a chance to talk to you since the draft, and you and I talked about a couple ways the Seahawks could go. I'm kind of curious what you thought about what the Seahawks did in the draft with Byron Murphy. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Christian Haynes on the other side of the ball, or any of the players like Tyrese Knight or Nehemiah Pritchett or D.J. James. Any of those guys jump off in your mind and catch your attention?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be Murphy. I mean, to me, that's kind of the piece that you really got to have inside that versatile piece. I think if you look at what the Ravens were able to do last year, a lot of what they were able to do defensively really came down to those two inside guys. I think Murphy's going to add that element, and there's enough depth there at Seattle to where he doesn't necessarily have to be the man right away. He's playing a very physical position inside, and it is an 18-week season. So being able to kind of keep him fresh and use him in spots, I think is going to be really important. I think if you just look at anything on that roster, what do we need going forward? Probably need to find a third corner that you feel comfortable with if you're going to move. Everybody's talking about Witherspoon playing in the slot at volume. If you're going to do that, you have to at least have an outside guy who you feel comfortable with playing beside him. So to me, I think Murphy answers problems inside, but that piece at corner is going to be where can we find some value and find a guy that can step in.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that, and I'm sure we'll have some time to do that. Before we get there, I did a show yesterday with another co-host, Jeff Simmons, and we talked about the Seahawks safety group. And the question we were kind of asking is this group better or worse? And from a name recognition standpoint, going from Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams to adding Rayshawn Jenkins and Kavon Wallace, Julian Love being the constant between the two seasons, most casual fans would be like, well, no, they're clearly worse. No one knows who Rayshawn Jenkins is. No one knows who Kavon Wallace is. A lot of people know who the other two players are. I'm curious, we'll get into the details of this, but when you just look at the change in those players, what's kind of your assessment of what did they give up in that transition, and what are they gaining with the guys that they've added?
Well, I think kind of Diggs, for instance, he kind of fell off towards the end. I think what you have right now is arguably you have three really, really good safeties. You may just not know who they are. I think Rayshawn Jenkins I had as a top 25 safety in the NFL. Kavon Wallace to me was the 14th best safety in the NFL last year. Love is serviceable as well. So you have three guys that you can play big nickel. You can move a safety down and play in the slot. So whether Witherspoon can go out, I think that's the piece that people are not looking at, is that who's going to be the third corner. If you move Witherspoon in, and like I said earlier, who's going to be that guy who's going to play outside? I know that there's some love-hate with Tariq Woolen, but he is a boundary corner. What does that mean? He can lock down the X. I have him as the number 2 man corner in the NFL last year. No, he's not great on run support. He's not going to be great in zone. And I know Macdonald is bringing in a lot of zone and things like that. But go look what the Broncos did with Pat Surtain, playing a lot of 3 lock with him, meaning that we're playing cover 3 everywhere else, but you're going to lock down this X receiver. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. Quarters is essentially man with rules anyway. You're playing cover 1. Macdonald isn't a really big cover 2 guy. So this isn't going to be one of those situations where, hey, we really need Woolen to be somebody that he's not. So I think safety wise, you got much better and much more productive, and it fits exactly what Macdonald is trying to grow here.
I want to get back and talk about those corners. There's a guy we talked to just a few weeks ago that I'm pretty high on and was ranked pretty highly, at least by PFF, in terms of press coverage, and Tre Brown. But you mentioned that Kavon Wallace was the guy that you had rated higher, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because you have this thing you call the HAVOC ranking, and so folks can see what I'm seeing. Let me put this up here for folks to look at. Talk about, this is your Kavon Wallace card.
Yeah.
Talk about what we've got here. What are we looking at?
All right. So I wanted to create a way to objectively look at the play. It's weighted, and I've got I'm working with Field Vision, who we're kind of a startup analytics company. We're working on a way to kind of create some sort of a player performance evaluation system, and so this is what I've been working on with Wallace. What you can see here, HAVOC. How often are you creating plays when you're targeted? And so this is what you can see here. And then what this is done, this is weighted against playing time. This is also weighted by how often you're running that coverage for a team, and then how good how good the rest of the defense is around you. So to me, what this is telling you is, if you look at Wallace, when they're blitzing, they're running cover 0. He's very good. Quarters, he's good. Cover 3, we're in at least the upper third. We're almost a top 25 safety in cover 2, and then we're top 15 when it comes top 20 when it comes to man coverage. So what this tells me is that he's very toolsy. He's good in almost all these coverages. And then what I went, and then an extension of this is how often pass rush he's being used, and then run rank as well. So you can see here, he's not necessarily a slot. He wasn't that like that. McCreary is one of the top slots in the NFL, so they weren't going to put him in the slot, but he's a very good safety. And so that's essentially what we're looking at. Is it's a way of not just saying, here's a Madden ranking of a guy. I'm actually explaining to you not only through coverage usage, but also his performance within those coverages.
So composite rank here, is this for overall among all safeties, or what's that?
So that would be the composite rank. And so the composite rank isn't, so the coverage rank is right there where you can say he's 17. And then the composite rank is factoring in his pass rush ability as well as his run rank.
Got it. So 17th as a coverage player, but when you factor in the run ranking as well, which is pretty low here, then it drops him to 22, which is still a decent thing. Right. The other thing is, you've got his 23 team as the Titans, and we know he played for both the Titans and the Cardinals. And from what I could see, his play with Arizona was significantly less than what he did when he was with the Titans. And it seemed like maybe different defenses was being used differently. Is that the case? Did you notice that as well? Yeah,
quarters based in both ways, I think, but what the Cardinals were trying to do didn't necessarily fit in. They've got 2 really good safeties. They probably didn't need a third one, so it was being able to get rid of him probably wasn't that big of a deal. And then he moves to the Titans. He plays a lot of quarters again, and is kind of playing in a mixed system of cover 3 quarters, more of what we're going to see actually in Seattle run. To me, again, the Cardinals is also a situation where you need to start factoring in what's happening also in front of him as well. And that's one of those systems that they just didn't have anybody up front. And they really just have two guys in secondary, Buda Baker being the one guy that probably everybody knows. And then it was just kind of a bunch of guys around him just trying to mitigate as much as they can.
Yeah. It was rough for them for sure last year. So just again, because we're going to look at a few of these, just orienting folks. So negative is good for defense, right?
Negative is good.
The more negative, the better.
Yes.
And you've got these rankings here for these different types of coverages. And just remind people what these different coverages mean. I know this is basic for you, but not everybody's is up to speed. So cover 0, cover 1, cover 2. What are these things?
Yeah. So cover 0 can be two things. It can either be, it's basically a blitz at the rudimentary level. It is a blitz coverage. So we are sending as many guys as we can, and we are just playing 0 behind it. There is nobody in the post. There is nobody deep. So that is going to be cover 0. You will see this sometimes like against teams like the Eagles that run a lot of like option reads and things like that. You'll see it. It's more of a quarters, but it's like man. It's essentially, like I say, quarters is man with rules. Quarters is your cover 4, obviously. So you'll see box coverage to the passing strength, kind of an upside down triangle to away from it. Cover 1 just means we're playing man across the board, and we're going to have a free defender in the post. Cover 2 is going to be that deep half, and then we're also going to have corners in the flats. That's just your regular cover 2. That's your Tampa. It's a zone. It's basically zone. And then cover 3 is what you would assume. It's going to have loose corners on the outside. You're going to have a post safety, but we're releasing any kind of crosser. So this is not cover 1. And then quarters is obviously cover 4.
So as far people talk about single deep safety, single high safeties, single post safety, that's cover 1 in general, correct?
Yeah.
So, but then there's 2 deep safety. That's the Tampa you're talking about. That's generally been cover 2. Cover 3 is when you have 3 guys. Is that true? That like 3 different portions of the field?
You still have your post safety, but your corners are going to be they're going to be zone on the outside. I did mention earlier, like the Broncos would lock Pat Surtain on the X receiver. So you're just, that's more or less in 3-by-1. But you're going to have 2 hook defenders, which are going to sit in the middle of the field, and then you're going to have 2 seam defenders who are going to take the curl on the flat. And so you have 4 under, you have 3 deep. That's what that shell is going to be. Cover 2 is going to have 2 deep, and you're going to have 3 underneath, and then the 2 corners on the outside.
So you've got for Kavon Wallace here that he excelled his strength. Well, he played pretty well in cover 0. His ranking was 7th, but cover 1 and quarters, he was ranked 16th and 17th in the NFL among safeties. What's the implication there that he is just a really solid coverage safety? Like what's he good at? Is he good at reading things? Is he good at matching up? Like what's he standing out at in those situations?
Well, if you look at the man rank, he's a top 20 player, top 20 safety in man. So he's going to be able to play man coverages. If Macdonald wants to play a lot of match, if he wants to play man coverage, he's going to be able to do that. So this is somebody that you're going to be able to put on a tight end. Maybe it's a running back, be able to do that. He can match up probably pretty well with some of these power slots that we're seeing now in the NFL. Not somebody that you're necessarily going to leave on, like a Tyreek Hill or something like that, but he can definitely run with some of these guys. And then, he's decent at zone. Cover 3, you're going to see some cover 3, a lot of cover 3 from Macdonald. So that right there is more of, he's okay in the back end, but he's still in the upper third of all safeties. So when you look at it, this is a solid all around coverage safety. His run rank should probably be a little bit higher, as you can see. So this is not going to be a down safety. This is not going to be a box safety type.
Mm-hmm. What are you basing the run rank on? I'm curious.
So I have another set of metrics that I use to do that, and then we rate it again. It's off of how much performance that you're playing, and kind of combining that all together, and then weighting certain things just to come up with that. So it's not just like a arbitrary, hey, he's ranked against all other safeties.
Yeah, helpful. One of the things I noticed when looking at these safeties yesterday is that and we're going to go through the other couple that you've got cards on here as well. But Kavon Wallace, when he was with the Eagles, he went 2 years without missing a tackle. When he was with the Cardinals, he missed a fair number. But when he was with the Titans, he only had one game that he missed any tackles. He had missed 2 tackles. He's like 5%, 4.7% missed tackle rate. Rayshawn Jenkins, also a solid tackler. If you look at last year, in terms of missed tackle rates in the NFL for safeties, these guys were all right around, I don't know, 11%. And I think that's selling Kavon Wallace a little short because of his time in Arizona. I'm curious, one, have you noticed that in evaluating these guys, does that show up in any of these rankings? And two, is that something that matters in Mike Macdonald's defense more than maybe some others? Do they ask safeties to be able to bring guys down more in space or anything like that than in any other type of system?
Yeah, I think in zone coverage systems that you have, like with my Macdonald, is that you're going to need to be able to tackle in space. I think you want guys that can tackle. I don't want guys that are just going to be able to play man to man. And if you're there, you're serviceable. We need guys that are going to be making tackles. They're not going to turn it down. They're going to be able to work off the leverage of other opponents of their other defenders. Because remember, a lot of these times, like we're going to get some sort of a vice tackle. I'm either going to be working inside or outside, and I'm going to be funneling the ball carrier to another defender because we're playing with zone. We have eyes on the ball. If it's run, I have a certain gap that I need to fit or a certain area of the box I need to fit. And so it's all about being able to be in position to make a tackle. There are some coaches that would argue a lot of times like missed tackles are a little bit overrated just in terms of how many of them are open tackles, how many of them are actually in the field. So that's something that you have to analytically try and go back and look at on film. Is like, okay, if we're having a lot of missed tackles, is it because I'm just not very good in the open field, or is it a flaw in the defense of where I'm not giving you basically a partner to play with, right? We want to always have an inside shoulder and an outside shoulder and a cap defender, meaning so we want to have inside, outside, cap. You want to have 3 defenders to the ball at all times minimum. If you have that, most likely you're going to have you're not going to have a lot of yards after contact. Typically where you see a lot of yards after contact is when there's only one guy there. Look, these guys are offensive guys. They're on that side of the ball and they're in the NFL because they're absolute freaks. Right. So that's to me, that's where those missed tackles look. When you have low missed tackles, that means that these guys are getting in position, they're making solid contact, and they're playing off the leverage of their other defenders.
Yeah. Part of the reason I bring that up is because Quandre Diggs, as much as I love the guy and love the player for the team, he missed a tackle in almost every game last season. So when I see a guy that's like, and I'm not even exaggerating, he had 1-2 game span last year where he didn't miss a tackle, but pretty much every other game he missed a tackle. And so when I see guys that can bring someone down and miss fewer tackles, I think that can be a big step forward for the Seahawks, and something I'm hoping can also add a little bit to the physicality of the team as well.
Yeah, I had just to your point, I had Diggs as 148th out of 148 in safeties in terms of run support in terms of my metric. Yeah. And then again, really good in cover 3, okay in quarters. So he's a zone guy. Your top 25 safety in zone, but can't play any man. He's 93rd in man. So that just kind of gives you a reason why he probably wasn't part of the plan when Macdonald came here.
That's really interesting. So just to repeat what you said there, worst safety in the NFL in run support, and then top 25 in zone, but you said 93rd in man?
In man coverage, yeah.
Help me with this a little bit, because I think I've heard you and others talk about that Macdonald is doing a lot of quarters and cover 3 and like some zone types of coverages. But then you've talked a lot about Kavon Wallace's man abilities. So they're bringing in guys that have stronger man capabilities. What's the implication there? Like, does it mean they're going to play more man, or what's going on?
You look, yes, I am match quarters, but the best coverage in ball is cover 1 when you can run, right? You can go look at what the Browns were able to do this year with an unbelievable pass rush and being able to play man cover behind it. You just can suffocate teams. Now, you got to have tools off of that. And you can't just we're going to be cover one all the time and then just run cover three like you saw with the Browns. They got kind of caught against the Texans. But what you want is you want the ability to play spot drop zone, right? You want to be able to play with vision, but then you also want to be able to play match. You want to be able to play some sort of a man tool, right? You want to be able, hey, we're just going to maybe man the seam, play zone everywhere else, or we're going to play a little bit more cover one because that's the guys that we have. I think when you look at like with Woolen, you want to have him in a match situation where we want to lock him on. We have guys, you want the ability to play man. That doesn't necessarily mean like we're going to be like the Jets played a lot of cover one last year. And then also the Browns played a ton of cover one. But we don't want to necessarily just live in that, right? Like the Cowboys are another great example. Just live in cover one all the time. So you want to be able to kind of have that nice balance. You want to be able to, on third and short, third and medium, to be able to play those really tight coverages near the sticks. But then on these longer downs and on these earlier downs, you want to be able to play with vision. And so you got to have a good mix. So what you're seeing in all of these guys is they're really good in zone and they're really good in man. So you're giving yourself options. More is more, right?
Yeah.
More is more. I know that sometimes, simple is better or less is more. There are times and especially when you have tools in the secondary, more can actually be more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating call out and statement coming from 14 years of Pete Carroll, whose philosophy was to simplify as much as possible so that players could play fast. But that once he did not have the kind of scheme or talent edge on the NFL, that really, really fell off. And so it's a stark contrast for sure. And I think something that a lot of Seahawks fans are looking forward to seeing in action.
If you go and you look at the teams that play simple defense in the NFL, their defensive lines are some of the best in the NFL. There's a reason why they can be very simple in the back end. Gus Bradley, go look at what they did in the offseason, getting guys to put around Buckner, getting edge rushers, creating an edge rush. So if we're going to just sit in 4-3 cover 3, we've got to be able to have something up front that's going to allow the secondary to then be kind of more basic out of that. Schwartz is the same way with the Browns. Go look at the Browns defensive line, the Jets defensive line, the 49ers, even the Texans, who are they're part of that kind of 49ers tree. They had production at edge and on the D line, probably more than they thought they were going to. So what can you do? You can be simple in secondary. And to me, it's philosophically, I think Macdonald's more on the let's be multiple in what we do, make the offense think and work. Whereas there's others that are just like, let's just get the best players, and this is just kind of what we're going to be, and let them play fast.
So let's move on to Rayshawn Jenkins. You've got your HAVOC card here. And by the way, what's HAVOC come from? Is that an acronym that you've come up with, or what?
So there is a thing on defensive, it's called a HAVOC rate. It's like how many negative plays that your defense can make. So I just wanted to use that term that's kind of familiar. I think we're going to use threat for offense. So like how much of a threat are you on offense? HAVOC is going to be that on defense. And so how much havoc are you causing when you're on the field? That's kind of where that term comes from.
Cool. So Rayshawn Jenkins, we just talked about Kavon Wallace, and just as a refresher for folks, he was 22 overall, 17th in coverage, 89th in run rank. Jenkins is higher. He's 19th overall. He's 19th in coverage, and he's 27th in run rank. So seems like a better all-around player here, more able to play maybe in the box, as needed. Talk to us a little bit about Rayshawn Jenkins, what he brings to the table.
Yeah, so this is going to be a guy that can support in the run. He's really good in the run. If you look at it too, probably not the best in cover one. So this is going to probably be either your free safety in that sense. He's going to be really good in run support. If you actually want to play him near the box in cover 3, you're going to be able to play all of your zone coverages. Like I said, he's the 11th ranked safety in my rankings in zone. He's 68th in man. So he is serviceable when you get that. To me, that's where if you really start looking at these pieces, is that you have a guy in Wallace that can kind of be your man guy. You've got Jenkins who can kind of be your zone guy. And then you've got Love that's like kind of in the middle. He's just kind of that third piece there that can kind of either you feel comfortable whether he's down or back, left or right. We're seeing a lot of times too in the NFL, we're seeing more left and right safety just because everybody's kind of playing from a too high shell. Doesn't mean they're playing cover two, doesn't mean they're playing quarters, but they're playing more and more from a too high shell.
When I look at Rayshawn Jenkins, one of the things I noticed was, again, similar to when I talked about Kavon Wallace, when he moved from Arizona to Tennessee, his level of play seemed to elevate quite a bit. When Rayshawn Jenkins went from the Chargers to the Jags, his level of play seemed to dip. And so I'm wondering if there's anything you saw from the scheme or from the talent around him that could have potentially contributed to that.
Well, I think if you going back, you listen to what Peterson said at the end of the year of why they decided to make the move. If you just look at the Jaguars season at big picture, I just give you a big panoramic view of all 18 weeks, and you just kind of aggregating it down to the averages. This is probably a top 15, 10 defense in the NFL. They're really good. Then you start really breaking it down by quarter, right? First 4 games, next 4 games, next 4, and then kind of the last 5. If you really break the NFL season down like that, this was a team that came out of week 8 and was just absolutely on a landslide defensively. And so it's hard too when things are going around. It's human nature. You were asking why was Wallace so much better with the Titans than he was with the Cardinals? Well, you kind of look at the chaos that's on defense with the Cardinals just in terms of personnel usage, and then there's stability with the Titans, right? This is the modern secondary. This is not cover one every single down, mano-a-mano matchup league, right? This is, I'm working with a nickel. How do I trust what he's doing? I'm working with a linebacker. How well is he getting into his drops and his coverages? We're seeing more zone coverages in the NFL. The man coverage ratings are going down. Yes, the Browns ran it at volume last year, but they were kind of an outlier in that. Same with the Dallas Cowboys. So when you actually look at it as a whole, when you look at the Jaguars, there was a downward trend starting with that. Part of that's going to then end up being that play. But if you look at it analytically, what he was asked to do, which I think is important, which I think is much more important than just objectively saying, this guy's a good corner. Okay, well, why? Well, he's good in this system. And so you're proving that all these guys that we've talked about are really good in multiple coverages. They're not just guys that are really good in man coverage. So I think when that, to me, I wanted to create a metric that could also be used in a team building sense. So when I'm getting a guy, is this really a good free agent pickup? Is this really a guy that's going to match within my system? And to give you context too, when we're looking at these, like, hey, Rayshawn Jenkins can play multiple things really, really well. Macdonald wants to play multiple things really, really well. This is a guy that fits our system.
When we look at Rayshawn Jenkins a little bit more detail here, he's 12th overall in cover 2. Is that a coverage that you see Macdonald playing much of?
I think behind his simulated pressures, which all a simulated pressure is that we're giving the illusion that we're sending more than we actually are, but we're only sending a rush of 4. So it could be you're blitzing an off-ball backer, but you're dropping a defensive end. You're still only sending 4. That's where you're going to see that. What Jenkins was doing at the Jaguars that's going to match over and carry over with what he's doing in Seattle is a lot of coverage disguise in the cover 2. This is not your father's Tampa 2. This is not the Tony Dungy Tampa 2 where you get, the Mike linebacker running through the pole. Teams still run that in the NFL, but we're seeing more and more coverage disguise in that sliding. I call Tampa 2 a whiteboard coverage. So imagine 11 X's on the board and they're in the Tampa 2 setting. You're literally just moving guys to X's and you're telling them, hey, we want you to end up here. This is going to be your spot. This isn't a match concept. This is a pure zone concept. So you can get multiple ways of running, whether we're running an inverted 2 with the corner on a big half and cutting a safety out to the flat. That's a big one that you see. And so adding then that blitz element as well off of it, So he was running that a lot at the Jaguars within that scheme. And in fact, I wrote about how they ran a ton of cover 2 against the Steelers. So if you go to Match Quarters, you type in Jaguars, that article will come up. And so that's a good complementary piece. I think Macdonald, he runs it a little bit, not at volume, but it's part of that simulated pressure piece.
We were talking to Coach Cody Alexander from matchquarters.com as we go through some of the Seahawks players in the secondary. And last safety we were going to talk about here, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about the corners. Julian Love. So of the 3, he has the lowest composite ranking. So Jenkins, composite ranking 19, Kavon Wallace 22, Julian Love 27. You've got his coverage grade at 40th out of 148 safeties. Man rank 54, zone rank 33, so better in zone, and his run ranking was 64. So it's interesting. I think Julian Love probably is the more well-known name of the 3, but for you, maybe the least of the 3. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, and that could be also too with just kind of what was going on defensively with Seattle last year. I think what you've seen in each one of these is and you can kind of get an idea of what Macdonald wants. I mean, he was able to have Hamilton last year that could play back and could play down. Now you're able with 3 safeties like this that you feel comfortable. Hey, we want to play more of a man game here. Okay, well, we know Wallace is our man guy. We're going to put him on the guy we want to play man. Then you have other tool guys like Love that he can kind of be that third piece that kind of fit in where we need him. We can move him around. He's pretty good against the run. Maybe he can play a little bit of down safety. We know that he can play some zone coverage, so he can play back. To me, there's not a problem with having 3 guys. And primarily, again, I go back to the corner thing, right? And we said we're going to talk about it. Like, you have Woolen and you have Witherspoon. You have 2 guys that you feel really comfortable with in situations like that. Having that third guy of being able of like, do we want to have a big safety, like big nickel and put a safety down, or do we want to have the corner? I think what you're seeing here by bringing in those 2 and adding to Julian Love is now we have guys that can play multiple things. And never forget, football is a game of attrition. So if we end the season week 1 through 18 and all of these guys stay healthy and all don't miss, that's a beautiful thing. But probably more likely one guy's going to miss a couple weeks, another guy's going to miss a couple weeks. And being able to have those 3 guys that you feel comfortable in the modern game, being able to play left and right and not necessarily box safety and deep safety or zone and man, that just gives you more to work with.
When they're in situations where they've got 2 safeties on the field, third is on the sideline. I know it depends on what coverage is, but let's say like start the game 1st and 10. Which of these 3 safeties do you expect to be the 2 that are on the field as kind of the quote starters?
I really think it's going to be Wallace and Jenkins. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's a new coach, it's a new system. I think that if you just go and you look at it, Wallace really just shows up on tape when you watch the Titans. In fact, it might be a little bit of recency bias. I did just get done watching them, but I mean, the one thing when I was looking at it was who I am always trying to find guys that show up. Wallace shows up, like you said, he never misses a tackle. He's around the ball all the time. Jenkins, to me, too, was a guy. He's more of your kind of your deep safety guy that's going to be able to play that middle field part. And then Love is that hybrid piece that can play down, can play back. Like you said, he's good against a run. It shows up there. He can kind of play every coverage pretty decently. So to me, it's going to be how quickly can each one of these guys kind of get the process of what they're trying to do and what Macdonald wants on defense, and then who can kind of do it. But all 3 of them are going to be serviceable. Whoever you get, it's like you're going to be fine. They're all 1A and 1B in my mind.
You have time to talk about corners for a little bit?
Yeah, we got time. We can talk about corners.
Let's do it. So I'll pull up the one card I've got from you, and then if you've got others you want to share, we're happy to do that, or we can just talk about it too. So Devon Witherspoon is the one that you had posted, and he ranks 17th overall for corners in your HAVOC ranking. He was 17th in coverage, 47th in run. What is PR?
So pass rush.
Rush.
So he is a great slot. And I think that to me, being able to blitz your corner, He's very Chief-like in that sense. The Chiefs would love Spagnuolo. I know would love to have Witherspoon and McDuffie and be able to just blitz the corner on every play, one or the other. But that's the other one. He had number 1 pass rush ranking. So when he does rush passer, he's hitting home. And I think too, remember, these are biased off of the team. So the Seahawks, he's gonna be high in cover 3. Because that's what they ran a lot. They didn't run a lot of quarters. They ran more quarters the past couple years. But where you really want things to show up is cover 1, which everybody runs, cover 2, which everybody runs, and cover 3. Quarters has kind of become more and more popular. It's growing. But with Witherspoon, as you can see, this is a guy that he can play zone really, really well. And we know he can play man. It's probably just more or less a matchup issue, or, we can go back into it, but he can play in that slot really, really well.
What is the I assume it's explosion percentage, or what is that?
So that's a percentage of snaps that they're giving up an explosive play, which is over 15 yards. So you want that to be low. What you're into that first down touchdown rate, that's also how many first downs. So what you take is you take your first downs, all first downs that you've given up. You take touchdowns that you've given up. You combine those and then you divide it by your plays. And so what you want that below 20%, and he's right there at 20%. So that's what I did with all of these as well, is also give you a look at some other metrics that are going to tell you. The rating is usually a pretty good one of like how well the quarterback throws when he's targeted. Yards per coverage is another one that you want. So that is all the yards you've given up divided by the snaps that you've played. You want that to be relatively low. You want that under 1, and you can see all of those really good in cover 2 when he was playing that seam, essentially a lot of times, or when he was playing that squat corner, that there just wasn't a lot going on. And then obviously really, really good in cover 3, which you would expect from a Carroll defense.
One of the questions with Witherspoon, obviously, he came into the league with the expectation he would be an outside corner. And I'm with you. I was early on, even before it became like, people are like, oh, they're punishing Witherspoon, I'm sorry, for playing, for holding out a little bit, and they're playing him inside. Eventually they'll play him outside. It's like, well, he can do both, but he's a Swiss Army knife at nickel. He's got such a rare combination of ability to impact the game from that spot. I think that's a great spot for him, but I also think he could be a shutdown outside corner, boundary corner. So there's some conversation, okay, with Macdonald, are they going to look to potentially move him out and find someone else? They drafted D.J. James, and they're going to play him inside. There's some conversation. Are there other guys that could potentially play inside? Do you think that they're going to look to move him out of nickel, or that this is just a great spot for him?
I think the 3 safeties gives you a little bit more of an idea of what's going to happen. I think also looking at what Macdonald was able to do with Baltimore, having a Hamilton that is more of a safety type, we're seeing more and more. If you just go look at the West, you've got the Carolina. You've got the Cardinals that want to play in 12 personnel. You have the Rams that are 11 personnel team, but they give you a lot of 12 personnel run concepts out of it, a lot of looks. The receivers are essentially, hybrid tight ends. They've talked about that forever. Then you go and you look at the 49ers. That is a 21 personnel, 12 personnel defense. You get where I'm going with this? You need a bigger guy out there. And if I can take Witherspoon and I can take Woolen, I can move them both outside. I can take one of those safeties. We can pick which one. Maybe that's where the competition really is this offseason, is who can play that big nickel. Once we can get one of those guys, now we can blitz really well. We're better in the run game. And then we're going to shut down your 2 receivers outside with 2 guys that can really play man coverage. I think Witherspoon too, it being asked to play man in the slot and then moving outside, those are 2 different techniques. So it's having him as like the 44th ranked cover 1 corner. You can see that having him around 40 in man. Remember, there's 64 corners that start in the NFL. If you can be close to at least 50% and be in that top, then you're the number 1 corner on your team, right? So to me, I think having him more in a defined role, being able to play him more outside. And people forget too, he played a ton of nickel at Illinois. This was not anything new. And having his size and his ability and being able to go back and forth, we're talking almost like a Jalen Ramsey type, being able to go back and forth. So the fulcrums of the modern defense are the nickel position and kind of that boundary safety position, because those are the two guys that are really going to be your overhangs on the box. And those are the guys that are typically going to be the ones that are moving around. Are they blitzing? Are they down in the box? Are they playing over top? They're the ones that have to be really good. So if I can have a guy that's really good in the nickel, that's not a punishment. And hopefully fans are starting to understand that. And I've been on the soapbox of, this is not Madden. You can't just move a guy to slot and then just be like, oh, look at his attribute ratings. That means he's a slot. This playing in the slot is not easy, and it takes different techniques and it takes different tool sets. Witherspoon has proven that he's had that not only at college, but at the NFL level. And so trying to find a safety within that group that can play that big nickel so that you can move him out or move him down. Trust me, there's going to be times where you're going to want him inside. There's also going to be times when you want him outside and you need a bigger presence.
Do you think Kavon Wallace is the most likely guy, given the man kind of information that you talked about, to be that potential big nickel?
Probably. To me, that's the one. You want a guy that can play more matchy, more man-like in the slot. That to me would make sense. That's why I said 1A, 1B, 1C. They're all kind of right there. It's probably more or less of who's going to be able to play down. Package wise, which Macdonald does a great job of packaging his defense and kind of using different people at different spots.
You want to talk Tariq Woolen next? You want to talk about this third corner?
Yeah, we can do Woolen really quick.
Do you have a card you want to share there, or what's the?
Yeah, I can pull up a card really quick. Actually, yeah, I can. Let me get it. Really
no
quickly.
worries. This is fantastic stuff for folks that don't know. This is Coach Cody Alexander from matchquarters.com. Been with us before, talked about Mike Macdonald's new defense and some of the things that he's doing that's setting some trends. And it actually builds on the conversation we had with Ted Nguyen from The Athletic and his investigations into Mike Macdonald and how he's coaching things up, and a lot of it about the fronts and the pressure patterns that he's teaching that are different than just straight front-based pressures. And so I think this is a great chance for us to learn a little bit more about our new coach and the actual personnel and how they might fit together. So we even know what to look for, as today marks the first day of OTAs. All right, let's get this up here. All right, so this is the Tariq Woolen card.
Yes, so Woolen is he excels in man coverage, as you can see here, number 8 corner in cover one. He's the number 2 man corner overall, 71st in zone. This is probably something that he's going to have to work on. When you watch the tape, he is just, I don't think people understand how big he is. He's 6'4", he's 210 pounds. He has really impressive press technique. He presses about, almost 40% of the time, which is up there in terms of that. If you're interested in the technique, you can go to YouTube or you can go to Match Quarters. I did a technique analysis on Woolen because he's kind of an anomaly. He's just so good in man coverage and he's so big. You would think that he would be okay in run. He's just not. He just doesn't. He turns it down. In fact, he was the lowest ranked corner that I had that had a run rating. That's why, and to a little bit, that's why he gets deemed in the composite ratings, because he's just not really good in zone. He gives up, like you can see here, that he gives up when targeted 2 yards. You remember, you want that underneath 1. You want that 1 yard under 1. He's in which cover 1 is he's pretty much a lead at. Cover 3 is really good, which again, semi kind of like man when you come at the corner spot. Quarters, again, man with rules. So I'm not surprised that he excels at quarters. I'm not surprised that he's, top third in cover 3, The cover 2 thing should worry you a little bit just in terms of zone. But if they plan on using him as more of a boundary corner, you're going to lock down the X. I think you have to have a plan for him and develop. I also think there is precedent for corners who are very man-centric to be able to play more zone. I think Stingley with the Texans is a good example of this. You also have Diggs with the Cowboys, who was very man-centric when he came into the league and then was able to transition into a pretty decent zone corner, which Diggs, currently is. So this is Tariq Woolen, kind of man. We got to get better at zone. We got to get a little bit more feisty in the run game. You're 6'4", 210. You should be able to get in there and have a body presence. So those would be the things that I would look for those excelling or getting better this year. I'm
curious, who is number 1 in man in your rankings?
In man, we can look at it here. I've got these. Let me get my rankings. I can give you my total rankings here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in man coverage, I have Sauce Gardner, which shouldn't surprise you. Tariq Woolen.
That's funny. Those two are going to be linked forever, aren't they, in that draft class?
Yeah. Okay. If you have not, go look at the 2022 cornerback class of draft. It is all starting corners in the NFL. It's wild.
Wow.
Yeah. Fabian Moreau, which I think is hilarious, is the Broncos. He was so good at man, but as good as he was in man, he was that bad in zone. And so he just gives up too much. Pat Surtain, Taylor Britt, Marshawn Lattimore, Martin Emerson, Stephon Gilmore, and then Greg Newsome. So nobody. I wouldn't be showing these public if they had like some random dude who was up there and you're like, what? The Fabian Moreau is a little bit of an outlier, but if you go and you look at what he was asked to do, it was a lot of man. He excels at it. But then also the other card, he's just terrible with zone. So that's kind of like modern. You got to be both ones.
And you don't have to pull up the card if you have it. Great, but Tre Brown played a lot for the Seahawks last year, and at least by another system, another platform, PFF, had him as the number 1 ranked press corner in the NFL. When he was in press coverage, he had the best rating there. And so curious, you've got him down here pretty low in the rankings. Talk to us a little bit about Tre Brown.
A lot of it has to do with playing time. So it is weighted against playing time. You don't play a lot. You have 2 really good corners in front of you. He does press at around 40% of the time. Press, to me, just if you look at correlation, it doesn't necessarily correlate to like just being really good. There's a lot of guys that are press corners. I think in the NFL anymore, you have to be a multi-tool guy. I've talked about this before about when you're an on-ball corner all the time, you come into the NFL, you're asked to play zone, you're asked to play off-ball, and you struggle. A lot of that has to do because by the time they were 12, 13, they went to their DB guru guy, they were working press. They go to their high school, they're playing press. They go to the SEC, they're playing press. And then they go to the NFL and it's like, hey, I need you to play off ball. And they're like, I don't have that toolbox because that had never been in there. So I think that, again, I think you're going to see it all comes down to teaching. Can you progress? And then vision a lot of times is this. And so really one of the things that it stands out here is that he's close to 40% in terms of first down TD rate. You don't necessarily want that. He is really good in quarters, just in terms of yards per coverage. But then you can see in cover 1, and that could easily be, remember you're only looking at 40% of his snaps. If you look at press, what are the other 60 snaps looking like? Especially too, if you look at it in cover 1, he was giving up almost 2 yards per coverage in cover 1, which is something that you just don't want to do. So that would be, I like Tre Brown. I've watched him before. He does some really nice things in man coverage, but it's like, we need you to take that next step. And to me, when you have 3 really good safeties, like we've seen right there, and then you have the 2 elite corners, you're probably going to more opt to try and play one of those safeties at nickel than you are to play a guy like that. But, again, he's a young player, somebody that probably needs to progress in terms of just being a more complete player.
Last guy, Mike Jackson, very different body type, and I'm curious if you've done any work on him. And this is a guy that there's some people are wondering if should give a shot at safety if they need him, and much bigger dude. So talk to us a little bit about what you have here for Mike Jackson.
Yeah, good man guy, good man corner. I think too, like if you really look at it, if this is a situation, my problem is we're not looking for a boundary corner. We're looking for a zone corner. We're looking for a guy that can play to the field. And really, I know in the NFL, you play in the middle of the field. So just for those that don't understand, playing field corner is like playing to the passing strength. Your boundary corner is your lockdown X. He's your dog. That's your traditional, I'm going to lock that dude up. And he plays usually away from the passing strength. The NFL is a 3-by-1 league. So who's got that by one side? That's going to be your boundary corner. And that's where that term comes from. But good in man, not great in zone. So again, we're looking for more of a complete player. He was pretty good in cover 1, not great in cover 3, which is not a good sign coming from a Carroll system like that. And then, a little over 100 in quarters. So we're looking for more production in the man. No, not a lot of feast and famine. Had a little bit lower first down to TD rate than we saw with Brown. But we're looking at kind of like you said, one presses a lot. The other's more of an off-ball guy, kind of a bigger guy, probably could be more, maybe he's the big nickel piece that we're looking at. So I think you've got tools, but finding that third corner is going to be the key here in the offseason.
It's interesting seeing the run rank for him at 95. He's one of the more physical players and one of the guys I would have expected to rank pretty well in that metric. So that's interesting to see. Okay, last question I've got for you, and if you got anything, great. If you don't, that's fine as well. Do you have any thoughts on either Nehemiah Pritchett or D.J. James, the corners that they drafted out of Auburn?
Yeah, Auburn is going to be both of those guys played in a multiple system under Ron Roberts. They've had a bunch of different defensive coordinators. They're in the SEC. Typically, when you see SEC corners, you're going to be, to me, Ron Roberts plays a lot of bracket, plays a lot of man. So these are both going to be on-ball corners. So again, they're trying to find that piece that, okay, we got guys that have played some zone. Right. Ron Roberts plays multiple defense. If you've ever watched Auburn defensively with Ron Roberts, if you ever watched Baylor when he was at Baylor with Dave Aranda, but these are guys that we know can play man. They've have a little bit of sense of like what's going on in zone. So to me, when you look at it whole picture wise, you add them to the two corners that you already have on there. We already have guys that can play man. We need guys that can play more zone. We can play different things in the back end. And I think that's where these two corners that you got from Auburn are going to come in and be able to play multiple different things and really push these other two guys to see. Because, again, competition breeds excellence. That's what you want. And so you need to find somebody who can play in that third quarter spot.
What makes somebody – what are things you look for as a defensive evaluator? What makes someone good at zone? I mean, man, I think is a little bit easier to understand in terms of – speed and agility and hips and smoothness there. But like, what makes somebody more adept at zone? Is it an IQ thing? Is it study? Like what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it has to do with perception, depth perception, understanding where leverage, eyes are really key in that, not staring at the quarterback, but getting context clues from the slot receiver, the release of my receiver. Playing off ball is a lot different than you will play in man. In fact, when I was coaching, we started off because it's harder. I think a lot of times the easy button in coaching is just go press. In the NFL, it's different because you can't just press everybody all the time. They're too talented. They're going to get off of it. That's what they work on. I mean, what do you think they're working on in the off season? It's all the dancing around. We see it all the time on Instagram. It's all dancing around, doing all the laterals and stuff like that. They're used to that. That's what they're working on. Because what's the DB guru guy working on? He's working on press. There's not enough guys out there working off ball mechanics. And so I think that what happens is you need a guy that either comes from a system that has played a lot of zone so they understand that, but also too of like, where do my eyes go when I'm not looking at my man? Where are the context clues? What is the departure speed of the slot? What's the departure angle of the slot? What is my guy doing? You got to widen your viewpoint. You got to use your whole peripheral vision. I think people kind of just take for granted their peripheral vision. But if you really think about it, there are different levels of awareness. Some guys can go all the way out, and some guys are almost like, the horses with blinders on. I'm only a man corner. I can only see my guy. you take those blinders off and it's like, whoa, there's way too much stuff going on. I think Stingley went through this with that Lovie Smith trying to play a lot of cover 2 in the Texans his first year. People are like, what the hell happened to this guy? I thought he was really good. And it's like, whoa, he's playing a lot of zone. He hadn't been asked to do it. He was an on-ball corner pretty much since the time he was born. Now he's being asked to really work. But to me, Trayvon Diggs was able to make that jump. Stingley's been able to make that jump. I think if you work in it and you find what works for that guy, again, it comes down to coaching. You got to be able to coach. I think Macdonald is one of the best at it. He's a great coach. He's going to require great coaching from his staff. I think, you want guys that are toolsy like that in the modern game.
So we started this, and this is the last topic, and I'll let you go. We started this with you saying on Twitter that Mike Macdonald can cook with this secondary. And I'm curious, with like all the personnel we've talked about so far, what do you think? I mean, the Seahawks were one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. Obviously, there's a lot of time between now when the season starts, a lot of stuff that can happen, not holding you to something. But your instinct, based on what you see of personnel and what you know of Mike Macdonald, what he's trying to do, what do you think is a realistic expectation of what type of defense this can be? Is it bottom third? Is it middle tier? Is it, where would you put it?
I would like it to sit right around 15, 16.
Yeah.
I think they still need to figure out some stuff on the D-line. You're going to have to manufacture an edge rush somehow. I think Murphy's going to help inside. If he hits, I think it's just going to change the game for everybody. Just because you have a guy inside that's just can clog things up. I've always liked Draymond Jones coming from the Broncos system. He fit with what they were trying to do. I've always liked him. He just hasn't been as productive as he was with the Broncos. To me, that's the big thing is you got to find another edge. And then you gotta manufacture some sort of a pass rush, because at the end of the day, your secondary is not going to matter at all if you don't have a pass rush. If the guy's back there playing 7-on-7, it's not going to matter. The quarterbacks are too good. The receivers are too good. So to me, if we're middle of the road at the end of the year and we're looking at it, and then the offense can come through, then I think that you're looking at a playoff team. I think that to me is where you should look at it. Is we find a third corner. We kind of figure out what we want with the 3 safeties we got. Murphy hits. Maybe we develop a little bit more of a pass rush. Because that was the thing last year with the Ravens, is that their pass rush was really electric, and the level of the play of the linebacker was really good. I think Tyrell Dotson is good. I have him as a top 10 linebacker. So I think they have things on defense that you can hang your hat on, and then maybe bring the level of play of everybody else around them up.
Well, that's encouraging. And I guess I lied. One last thing. What do you think what would be the barrier? What would they need in order to get above middle of the road? Is it really this edge pass rush? Is it the third corner? What's the key for you about them going from being don't get me wrong, going from worst in the NFL or one of the worst to middle of the road would be a fantastic step forward. But just curious, what keeps you from saying they could be more than that?
I think it's the edge rush. It's pass rush. I mean, if you don't, you can go look at it. If you have no pass rush, if you have no interior presence within your pass rush, you're just not going to be very good. I mean, go look at all the teams that are really good defensively. It's no surprise that they have really good defensive lines. This game, at the end of the day, is built up front. I know we talk it's the sexy stuff, right? The quarterback, the passing game, the secondary, all that stuff. Trust me, I'm a DB guy. I love DB play. But I'm also not, too dense to understand that it starts up front. And if you don't have a defensive line that can really clog gaps and stop the run, that way you can allocate more numbers to the passing game, then it's just not going to matter. So to me, that edge piece, finding a presence inside, pairing guys up correctly to where they can work together, that to me is the only hang up in terms of going from last to first, right?
Love it. Cody Alexander, matchquarters.com. Cody, tell folks where they can find you and tell us anything else you've got coming up on the site.
Yeah, so you can find me at matchquarters.com. That's where I house everything. That's also Match Quarters. You can go to YouTube. I have, like I said, I think the Woolen thing's on YouTube, but it's also on the Substack. Everything feeds through the Substack, matchquarters.com. You can find me at my Twitter handle, _coach_A. What I'm doing is I'm going back through and I'm looking at all the NFL teams. I'm kind of going through what are some top concepts that they're doing. I do long form and I do video. So whatever you're into, I've got that as well. Projects that I have coming up, like I said, with the Tariq Woolen technique analysis, I'm going to try to do one of those every other week. Some of these top corners. So that list that you just saw, I'm going to go through a lot of those guys. Like I just got done doing the Deron Bland one. So I've got guys that you're going to know coming down. So if you like defensive back play and you like defense, go to matchquarters.com.
Amazing. That was Cody Alexander. Thank you, Cody, for joining. We will definitely have you back when we get into linebackers. Sounds like you got some thoughts there. I'd love to hear more about that. But for now, that was fantastic. People, make sure you go to matchquarters.com. Give Cody a follow at _coach_A. Thanks again, Cody, for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that was Cody Alexander, man. Every time he is on, I feel a little bit smarter as a football fan. It starts with me feeling a little stupider, but then I learned throughout that's why he's a coach. That's why he does what he does. And hopefully you guys gained something there. That was a great way to learn a little bit about how someone totally independent of the team, independent of the coaches, independent of the players, but that is very well respected. If you look at who follows Cody Alexander online, it is not just the average Joes. It is coaches. He's someone who's really well respected in the coaching industry for his defensive perspective and the work he does to break down players and schemes and trends. And so it's a great voice to have on the show, and someone that I certainly learn from each time. And I got to say, I'm pretty excited about what I heard there, and a little surprised to know that Rayshawn Jenkins and Kavon Wallace ranked higher than Julian Love as out of the three safeties. Wouldn't have expected that. Would not have expected that coming into this offseason and evaluation. Kavon Wallace felt like a throw-in signing, like most people have never heard of Kavon Wallace. I mean, you can say you have, but this guy was getting a few hundred snaps with the Eagles, and then last year he was getting some snaps with the Cardinals. He got cut. He ends up with the Titans, plays well there, but this was not a guy that most people know about as casual fans. And when I went to dig into his numbers, I was impressed with what I saw. And then you have Cody as an independent observer and evaluator of play doing his evaluation of Kavon Wallace and having him as the 22nd rated safety, and more importantly, 16th ranked in man coverage, 7th in cover 0, 16th in cover 1, 17th in quarters, 17th in coverage overall. You add that with the fact that he's one of the better tacklers at the position, I think he's a sneaky big addition to this team. And I think someone that people just maybe are sleeping on a little bit. And then you throw in Rayshawn Jenkins, who has got rated even higher at 19th. Rayshawn Jenkins, 27th in the NFL among 148 safeties in run defense in Cody's evaluation. That's coming in when Quandre Diggs ranked 148 out of 148 in run defense. I think that's a huge, huge change that should not be underestimated in how this defense is going to show up on game day. And the fact that Rayshawn Jenkins ranked 11th in the NFL among safeties in zone coverage, according to Cody, that's a big deal. I mean, that's going from a situation where you had a guy that was one of the worst in the NFL in run defense and someone who was good as a zone safety in Quandre Diggs, to a guy who's also good in zone coverage and excellent at defending the run. So I think that that's a nice piece. It was interesting to hear Cody say that he would guess that Rayshawn Jenkins and Kavon Wallace would be the 2 starters. He was talking a lot about three safety scenarios, and where you've got a big nickel. And we were talking about that Kavon Wallace may be the likely option. Maybe it's Mike Jackson. I have continued to think Mike Jackson might have an interesting role with this team. I think we'll see how Mike Macdonald evaluates him, but he might be part of the solution there. And I also frankly was surprised to hear they need to find a third corner from Cody's perspective, because I think they've got more than 3 corners. But when you look at Cody's evaluation, Tre Brown was pretty low on his list. Now, he had him as a decent man cover guy, but there's some issues there. And so we'll see. I'm still very bullish on Tre Brown being a productive part of this defense and a productive corner and a good one. But we'll see. He's got to prove it. And Mike Jackson, as we said, we don't know what's going to go there. But then you got the new kids in Nehemiah Pritchett and D.J. James. Depending on what D.J. James provides, he could end up being that big nickel. And he's definitely a different size profile than Devon Witherspoon. And I also thought it was interesting to hear how high he is on Tariq Woolen. He had him as the second ranked man cover corner in the NFL, behind only Sauce Gardner. That's just important to hear. And what was generally considered a down season for Woolen, a lot of what was a down season for him was around 2 things. Everybody knows about the run defense and the tackling, but the other thing was that he got lost in times in zone coverage and his responsibilities. And I think some of that is about preparation. And it's one thing to just lock onto your guy. It's another thing to know, well, like, okay, my responsibility, if this guy goes here, is this. If this guy goes there, it's that. There's more variation. There's more thought. There's more study and preparation that's required. I'm not sure that Tariq Woolen has proven that he is a pro when it comes to that type of professional, like that kind of preparation. So those are the 2 things. But when you've got a guy that is elite in man coverage, you got a place for him. He's valuable. So I think this talk of, he's no good, or I don't know about him yet, I think that's just frustration. It's not based in facts. And it is a reality that this is a guy that he's got issues that he's got to address. And either he's going to be a professional and put in the time to get better, or worst case scenario is you've got a guy that has some flaws, and you got to figure out how to minimize those flaws by the types of schemes you put him in and the types of responsibilities you have. From Cody's perspective, the answer in some regard is you can play zone and have him play like Patrick Surtain in Denver, where he is locked on as a, shut down the X receiver in man coverage, and other people are playing zone around him. So I think there's some opportunities, and I am heartened by the idea that the Seahawks finally have a coach and coaching staff that feels like they will be up to the task of figuring out how to leverage these different players and how to put them in positions to really shine. And it just feels like that was not the case for a while now. So I'm encouraged about that. And also cool to hear him talk about Devon Witherspoon and how he sees the just massive value that he provides as a nickel corner, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. So bunch of stuff there from Cody. I hope that you all enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. I'm going to come back on here in just a little bit. I'm going to end this episode, and then I'm going to try something I haven't done before. I'm going to try to do a little film watching on Kavon Wallace. So feel free to tune back in just a little bit. I'm going to separate that out as a separate video. So this one will end, and the other one, I'll put that back on once I'm ready to do it. And feel free to jump back in. We'll kind of watch a little bit of Kavon Wallace together. He's a guy I just want to get to know a little bit more because, frankly, I just didn't watch a lot of him up until this. I just haven't watched a lot of him, period. So feel free to join back for that tomorrow. If we were going to be talking to Jarek Reed later today, Jarek and I agreed that tomorrow is a better time slot. So he will be on. It's looking like around 2:00 tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for that. We are going to start getting more news out of OTAs this week as the team reports and they start doing 11 on 11. I will try to bring on some folks that can give us a little more details about what they're seeing. Maybe we'll get a little Mike Sando. Maybe we'll get a little Brady Henderson. Who knows? But until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks to all the folks, the thousands of folks that tuned in this morning. It's been great to have you. And if you haven't already, please click like and click subscribe. Would absolutely appreciate it. We're well over 10,000 subscribers and growing, and would love to have you join as a YouTube member as well. The link is in the chat. It's pinned there. It's also in the description of the video. If you want the audio version of these podcasts, which I'm telling you, it's way better experience than just trying to listen to the video while it's playing in your pocket. You'll want the audio version. Go to patreon.com/hawkblogger. The link is in the description of the video as well. That gets you access to the Slack channel. It gets you all of the audio versions of this podcast. And those are available to you on Spotify as well. So appreciate you supporting the show in whatever way works for you. I absolutely love it. And until next time, I will say I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings.